Right now, we're now hearing from the French President Emmanuel Macron calling on Israel to avoid escalation, particularly in Lebanon. Let me bring in my next guest, Muhannad Ayyash. He's a professor of sociology with the Mount Royal University, and he joins me now live from Halifax in Nova Scotia. Thank you so much, Professor, for being with us on the program. So our correspondent there saying that there are chances that this could evolve into a wider conflict, given the influence that Al Arouri had on Hamas. What are your thoughts on that? Because many are saying that one of the factors that will lead this to turning into a wider conflict is the fact that it happened in Lebanon. It resulted in the deaths of 6 other people. But now the ball is in Hezbollah's court, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you for having me. Look, it is still difficult to predict what is exactly going to happen as a result of this. I mean, I think it is clear that the Israelis and Hezbollah don't want to escalate into a wider, full scale war and a wider regional conflict. So let's be clear. That front has been open since October. It's just been open as a low intensity confrontation. And I don't think either side really wants a full-blown confrontation. I mean, I can't explain the Israeli government's silence on this by any other reason other than the fact that they actually don't want that escalation. Hezbollah has been, they will definitely respond to this, but it's yet to be seen what kind of response they will have. But look, at the same time, wars and wider regional conflicts don't start always because everybody wants to do them. They can start in these ways. They can start with people saying, well, I have to respond to this. And then they might do something that the Israelis say, well, I have to respond to this. And then they say, I have to respond to this. And on it goes until there is a wider full-scale war. So it's still very possible that we slide into a full-scale war and a wider regional conflict. That is still on the table. I don't know if that's going to happen. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's still a possibility, that's for sure.
Right, and the geopolitical dynamics will without a doubt have an impact on the framework of a post-war Gaza. But there is this understanding, especially among the Jewish population, that it's Hamas today and it's going to be another group tomorrow, which essentially means that the occupation, which is the bigger problem in the picture, has to come to an end. Would that be part of a post-war plan for Palestine?
There is no post-war until there is an end to Israeli occupation. It's impossible to talk about anything that is post-war because the Palestinian people have been under, or the Israeli state has declared a war on the Palestinian people since 1948. It's, in fact, prior to that, but we can start in 1948. So for 75 years, the Israeli state has declared a continuous state of war against the Palestinian people. So the war cannot end unless the occupation ends, unless settler colonial expansion ends, unless the system of apartheid is dismantled. That is the only real solution. And let me, this is really important because it also is related to this particular incident. Netanyahu is going to be talking about this as a victory at some point. They're not doing it right now, but at some point, they're going to be talking about this as a victory, that they killed this Hamas leader, et cetera, et cetera. But that actually is not a real victory because this, Hamas itself is not representative of the larger Palestinian struggle, let alone one individual. I don't care how high ranking he is and how important he was for Hamas. The struggle is much bigger than one individual or one political faction.
Right.
And that Palestinian struggle will continue until the occupation is ended.
Right. Speaking of the struggle, I want to quote something that you wrote in an article recently on why October 7 happened. So in the quote, you say, the recent attacks on Israel from Gaza are not aimed at immediately liberating Palestine, even if that discourse is sometimes used by the resistance. Rather, these operations are meant to change the outlook and the dynamic of the struggle itself. Expand on that for me if you can, because it would surely be a response to the many people who say, well, Hamas knew Israel's response would be so devastating.
Yeah, and it's still, by the way, not all that clear to me how much, if they expected that it would be this devastating, but they certainly should have known that it would have been devastating. But the context in which this operation was launched was one where the world had more or less moved on and has decided that the Palestinian struggle is lost and should be forgotten, and the Palestinian people should accept whatever little scraps the Israeli state and its allies have decided to give it. I'm not so sure that we're still in that world now. I think it will be much more difficult, for example, for Saudi Arabia to carry out a normalization deal with Israel. I mean, I can't imagine that happening. Certainly not anytime soon, if ever. This is kind of what I was referring to, that there was this regional and, in fact, international, beyond the region, dynamics that had decided that the Palestinian struggle for freedom and liberation and sovereignty is over, that the Palestinians are not a relevant political player in the region and do not factor into future plans for the region. This is in some ways part of what this operation was meant to put a stop to and challenge. The degree to which it's been successful in doing that, and that remains to be seen. It's not. This is not, of course, a closed case here. This is an ongoing story.
Mhm.
But certainly, I think the world today thinks of Palestinians in a different way than it did just last summer.
Professor Muhannad, I think it's fitting to end on another quote from that article that I read, where you say Palestinians have proved once again that they won't easily give up their indigenous claim to and sovereignty over the land stolen from them. Thank you so much for being with us here on TRT World.
Thank you so much for having me.